When the angels had departed and gone back into heaven, the shepherds looked to one another and said, "We must go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened that the Lord has told us about." And so they hurried off to Bethlehem, and there they found Joseph and Mary and the baby in the manger. And when they had seen the child, they began to spread the word about all that they had seen and heard and what had been told to them. And all who heard it were amazed. But Mary treasured it up and pondered all these words in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, praising and glorifying God, and telling everyone who would hear the amazing stories that they had seen and heard exactly as had been told to them. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Neither of Brian Reagan's parents told him many stories when he was growing up, but one of the stories his father told him haunted him for years. This was his father's story. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who was very poor. He and his siblings lived with their widowed mother, and she had barely enough to feed them. He worked very hard after school each day and on weekends. His clothes were worn, and he had only one toy, a little car. Even his toy was broken. The roof was smashed. There was only one window left in it. 2 wheels were missing. The little boy loved it very much, and he had nothing else to play with, so it became a race car when he wanted to be a sportsman. It became an ambulance when he wanted to be a doctor. It became a tank when he wanted to be a soldier. Christmas was approaching, but the family was very poor. There would be no presents. All the same, the little boy was excited because this was the first year he would be able to go to his church, his Catholic church, for the midnight mass. Everyone had told him how splendid it was. Everyone had told him how before the mass got really started, there would be this beautiful blessing at the creche. It was a very large one. There were large plaster figures of Joseph and Mary, the shepherds with their sheep, the wise men with their camels, angels hovering above. And in the very center of all this was a large plaster baby Jesus. Now, the custom of this congregation was for everyone who came to the service to give a gift and to set this gift around the crib of the Christ child. Before taking their place in the pews, they would walk forward and set their gifts down. Well, the little boy wanted to give a gift to the Christ child, but what could he give? He gave all of his money from his after-school job to his mother. He decided that during Advent, he would start working a job early in the morning before he went to school. He did that each day, and so he earned this extra money. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, he had enough money to buy a nice present that he could present at the creche. He sat down at the table, he put all of his money down, he started counting it. But before he was finished, his mother walked in. "Oh, son, what a good boy you are. Now we have enough money to have a real Christmas dinner." She scooped up the money and she headed out to shop before the stores closed. The little boy was heartbroken. Now he had nothing to leave at the manger. He went into his room trying not to be angry at his mother. He thought of what he had been taught in situations like this. Offer it up to Jesus. On the dresser, he spotted his little toy car. And at that moment, he realized that was what he had to give to the Christ child. He dressed in his best clothes and he put the little car in his pocket. He went alone to the church because his mother had to stay with the younger children. He felt very much alone because everyone else was with family or friends. He walked up to the creche where all of these gifts were. Some had brought chalices for the altar. Some had brought beautiful clothes for poor children. Some had brought envelopes stuffed with money. He felt embarrassed as he set down his broken toy car. He then squeezed into one of the front pews, and moments before the service began, one of the ushers came forward to look over the situation, to make sure everything was fine. But that usher's eyes fell upon that broken toy, and he got angry. And he picked up that and said, "Who would give such a thing to the Christ child?" And he threw it across the church. On the other side of the church, it ended up upside down. The service began. The little boy was crying. The priest was coming forward in the procession, and when he got near the creche, he stopped. All the singing stopped. Because the plaster Jesus had turned into a real child, and this baby was crawling across the floor, across to the broken car. He picked up the broken car and put it under his arm and then crawled back to the creche. The priest took his final steps up and peered in, and again it was just a plaster figure, except that it had a very big smile on its face, and its arms were crossed, and it was clutching the toy car. Reagan absolutely resented his father's story. First, because he believed his father was saying to him, "Why can't you be a good little boy like that little boy in the story?" Later, he resented his father because he realized his father was presenting himself as the good little boy. And nothing could have been further from the truth. Oftentimes he got drunk. He was abusive. Reagan was afraid of his father. He despised him. As he grew older, Reagan left the church for many years. But at some point he realized there was this emptiness in his soul, and so he decided he would try the church again. He started coming regularly. And as he did, over time, his faith began to mature. And one day, it hit him. He had cast his father in the wrong role. His father was not the good little boy who gave his toy to the Lord. His father was the smashed car with the wheels missing. He had failed in his public life. He had failed in his private life. His family thought he was an enemy. Reagan wished he could somehow untangle what was his father's fault and what was the fault of the war he had experienced and the life blows he had taken. Whatever had darkened his life, it was enough to break him. He was a wreck. And as a result, his father desperately longed to be cradled in the Savior's arms. All of us have times when we need the assurance that God's loving arms will embrace us. Whether it is when we make a mess of things or when life is harsh to us, we need the promise that there is nothing in this life, there's nothing in death, there's nothing at all that can separate us from God's love. Tonight, as we peer into the manger to ponder and to celebrate the birth of the Christ child, we remember that this child was God's one-of-a-kind gift. The babe of Bethlehem was God's gift of love. He was a gift of love like presents you and I give, but unlike the presents you and I give. Many of the gifts we give are certainly given out of the spirit of love. We truly, truly care about certain people, and a Christmas gift offers us the opportunity to say, I love you, I care about you, you truly mean something to me. My life is richer because of you. However, God's gift of love was a child. A gift not only for his parents, but a gift for the whole world. This child would grow up to become a window into the heart of God. He would reveal that God is not a criticizing, thumping, punishing parent, but a God of forgiveness, which is to say, a God of second chances, a God who is eager to transform us into our better selves, people of joy, people of goodwill, people who are at peace with themselves and at peace with others, people of hope. The birth of Christ declares God's never-ending love for us. There is nothing we can do to earn it. There is nothing we can do to reject it. There is nothing we can do to repay it. So we must learn to receive this gift, to be transformed by it, and to pass it along to others.